Hello and welcome to Radical Podcast. I'm Ryan McKenna, at Truly Radical on Twitter. Sorry, that's at Truly_Radical on Twitter. And this is the Radical Podcast where we discuss radical ideas, radical thought, radically new perspectives on the world and how things work. Radically different in any case from what we're generally taught in school, what we're generally informed on by the media, by our politicians and our various institutions. And the reason why we need radically new ideas is because we have radically new information. We have radically new data. And when the information indicates that what we're doing doesn't make sense, then inevitably what we'll have to do is change or just simply wipe ourselves out. Because we're not working with things as they are, dysfunction will only continue, and eventually things will not be able to be patched together any longer, and we'll end up with something radically new. So the opportunity that we have right now is that things haven't collapsed. We can develop smooth transitions. We have a global communications infrastructure to facilitate this, and for the first time in human history, we can all talk to each other, we can all work with each other, we can all collaborate and produce and create together, no matter where you are in the world. Two people can work on a document from opposite sides of the world at the exact same time. Talk on Skype or FaceTime or whatever you have. So, radical change is going to happen. It's already happening, in fact. The internet itself and where we have come because of the internet and where we're going and how fast things change every minute of every day, all of that is generating radical change. A lot of it you can't see. Everything still kind of looks the same. But any of you folks who were around, I was born in the mid-'80s, so that means that I remember when most phones were on a cord attached to a wall or on a table. I remember when if you wanted information, you had to go to the library, and you had a very limited selection of said information. I remember many, many things about the world before that was entirely different. And it's an interesting shift. We don't know where it's going. But by examining how things work, by educating ourselves, which is easier now than ever before, we can generate that radical change. And that's what this podcast is all about. That's what my conversations with you are all about. That's why I always say throughout the podcast, I'm looking for feedback. I want to hear what you think, and I want you to be talking about these things with other people. I don't mean arguing, I don't mean fighting, I don't mean pushing it on them. I just mean bringing it up. Today I read an article about basic income being trialed in Ontario, very soon to come. Part of the new federal budget, as I understand it. At least that's the whispers. That's huge. That is a radical change. That's not something that anyone would have anticipated happening 5 years ago. Proportional representation or some sort of electoral reform is coming here in Canada. It's probably going to be coming not too much later down in the United States. Across Europe. So radical change is possible. Things are changing dramatically every day, and we can observe, we can learn, we can exchange ideas, and through the exchange of ideas, we can weed out the bad ideas and improve the good ones. So usually I have a topic of the day, but I just upgraded my package with Spreaker, which is currently hosting the podcast. And I now have virtually unlimited time to record. So, today, in light of that, I'm just going to ramble. If you prefer the more targeted topics, more targeted chats, then, there will be lots more of those. I plan on doing an episode on hallucinogenics, such as psilocybin mushrooms and dimethyltryptamine, and their potential for helping us with the woes of the world, and their potential for changing the face of healthcare, especially mental health care. That'll be one episode coming up. Another episode that I would like to do is going to be on banking, the financial industry, and money. So these are all coming up, but today I'm just going to ramble off the top of my head. I've been obviously on Twitter a lot. A lot of you have probably found the podcast through Twitter, since it's my primary means of disseminating information. And I've noticed there's a lot of effort to divide and conquer, which is the oldest trick in the book when you're talking about institutions and power struggles and things like that. It's extremely obvious and extremely easy, or at least it was extremely easy. Like I said, though, now we have the ability to do things like fact-check things. Hillary Clinton came out either today or yesterday and said that something like most of her campaign financing comes from individual small donors. Almost immediately, we were able to fact-check that and find out, no, only 20% or 19% of her campaign financing is coming from small individual donors. You know, it's easier these days to expose lies, to expose manipulation, the dysfunctions within the system. This is different. What's happening right now in the United States and Canada is different than what we've seen before. There's a lot of die-hard, party line sort of people who have been, die-hard Republicans or die-hard Democrats, and they are thrown for a loop right now because it's not familiar. What you really actually have is you've got two independents who are taking on the bulk of the enthusiasm and the momentum, and then you've got the actual Democrats and the actual Republicans, which are basically the same thing. You know, if you put Hillary Clinton's record, Ted Cruz's record, and whoever else is still in the Republican race, Dennis Kucinich, if you put any of them next to each other, they're all, the changes are minor. The differences are minor in their voting records when it comes to military spending, when it comes to healthcare spending and Social Security and the whole nine yards. They're conservative individuals who are, driven by their corporate funders. It's quite obvious. And the appeal of, as I said in another episode, of Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump is that they're not part of that system. Donald Trump's part of his own horrible system, which nobody seems to be paying attention to, but they think that gives him, liberty, freedom, all those things that libertarians have been sold for years. Another thing that you've got happening right now is you've got people coming out to vote who never, ever, ever considered voting before. Why? Because now there are candidates who actually speak to them and speak to what's going on within them and speak to their hopes and their fears, and hopes in the case of Bernie Sanders and fears in the case of Donald Trump. But there's something shifting. Now, the reason that I think this podcast is necessary is that even though the shift is happening, there's a conflict. The shift can't happen without conflict. Doesn't mean the conflict is good or bad, it's just going to happen. Anytime you have a major transition, you're going to have conflict. The question is, what sort of conflict is it going to be? Is it going to be a conflict of ideologies, of discussion, of debate, or is it going to be a physical confrontation? Is it going to be tyranny? Is it going to be oppression? Or is it going to be a shift that is in line with how things work? A shift with awareness and self-awareness and compassion behind it. I think that's the way it's going to go, because it's what people like you and I are going to keep pushing for. It's what we're going to keep demanding. I've talked before about how there's 62 human beings, that this is according to, I think, an Oxfam study from not long ago, 62 human beings who own over half the wealth of the planet. More than all the rest of humanity combined. So, those 62 human beings are few, and the rest of humanity is many. And before, we were separated, at least in a communication sense. We were separated by borders. We were separated by media filtering through everything that we heard and saw on a daily basis. But now we're connected. So what the media says becomes more and more irrelevant, because the media is starting to become split. We're the media. We generate content. We edit. We publish. We market. We do all of it. We create news. We editorialize. We produce videos and images, video games, and everything that you can imagine, apps. And we all do it from our homes or from our phones, or, through the tools that we have available to us. So we have a choice in what we want to endorse and what we want to support. More than that, like I say, we have more and more of a global collective. We can examine one another's information, fill in the blanks when it's missing, correct misconceptions, share sources and refutations and all of these things. The wealth of human intelligence is all available online. I'm not saying online is our salvation. I'm saying we are our own salvation because we generated the online world, because we created a physical connection between as many of us as we possibly can, and we're trying to expand that constantly to include everyone. We've created a connected world by connecting, by engaging. And we can see by the very addiction to technology, the very attachment to our phones, to our online selves, to all of these notions, we can see that it's important to us on a very, very deep level, that connection. We can see that that's a truth about humans, that we want to connect, we want to talk, we want to converse, we want to discuss. We want to cooperate. We really do. We cooperate, like I said in a previous episode when I was talking about stressful environments. Stressful environments produce competitive behavior because you have scarcity within them. Scarcity is what produces overly competitive behavior. As in competitive behavior where you are competitive beyond your own self-benefit and to their detriment, where you're comfortable with someone else suffering or someone else losing their livelihood or their possessions or what have you, so long as you win. That's unhealthy competitiveness. It weakens all of us. It doesn't strengthen anyone, not even the person who wins as they see it, because that person becomes disconnected. Because in order to win at the cost of someone's death or injury or loss, you have to disconnect. That's what war is. War is disconnecting, and it's the ultimate statement of disconnection. When you feel connected to other people, when you feel like they're part of you, how can you kill them? It'd be like chopping off your own arm for no reason. You feel that pain as intensely as if you were doing it to yourself. Because you know you are. You know it deeply when you have that sense of connection. That's what empathy is. That's what compassion is. That's what love is. It's connection. Fear breaks that connection. It keeps us out of the present moment. The present moment is our source of connection, because it's where everything comes into focus. It's where everything localizes. Right now is when everything is happening. It's always now. It wasn't before, and it's not going to be later. It'll always be right now. We have so much potential. Virtually every human I've ever met in my entire life has been brilliant at something, even if they didn't know it. Even if they thought they were terrible at everything. Everyone's been brilliant at something. The fact that it never manifested as anything is a testament only to our continued waste of human potential within our society and our institutions. How many of you are stuck in a job that you hate, or just that you don't care about? It's just a paycheck. If it's just a paycheck, how well do you think you do your job? I can tell you, not very well, not unless there's something about it that you really, really, really care about. But you probably do it just well enough to not get fired. Like most people. Imagine if you were doing something that you really cared about, that you really loved doing, that you really felt you were good at. Imagine if society tried to amplify each other's strengths, to encourage them. Like really tried. I don't mean just words. I mean setting up a society that has systems in place to encourage people to look at themselves as an unlimited wealth of potential instead of as, well, you're lucky you've got a job. You're just lucky you've got a job. We can do so much better than that. Someone with an IQ, and I know IQ is not the only judge of intelligence, but it's a metric, and we can use it here just as an example. But someone with an IQ equal to Einstein is probably out there washing dishes right now. Because they were told their whole life that they couldn't focus, or they couldn't follow through, or that there was just some fundamental flaw with them. And they believed it. That happens all the time. Brilliant people think they're stupid all the time. We also put barriers in place to people making connections in their mind, to understanding, to truly understanding things. It's because we teach them false concepts. Concepts that don't make any sense at all. At all. Like free will. Free will does not make any sense. It's a misnomer. Freedom is not a real thing. Freedom's an idea. And really what we're talking about is freedom from dysfunction, not freedom from each other, not freedom from being coerced or controlled, because we are coerced and we are controlled by everything. And because we are controlled and coerced by everything, literally, it all plays on our biology. It all works to react. Everything in our biology reacts to everything in our environment that we pick up. Many things we are not even aware that we pick up. So, we're tricked. These things that cause something called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the source of a lot of confusion in people, because they're taught to simultaneously accept two different opposing ideas. Religion is the most obvious source of this. Well, God gave you free will, but God's got a plan. Okay? Well, if God's got a plan, that means everything has to work out according to plan. And if everything affects everything else, that means me using my free will is going to screw up God's plan. It doesn't work. And no matter how you try to rationalize it, it doesn't work. Either God's got a plan and I'm in a deterministic universe, or it's a non-deterministic universe and I'm just floating around somehow without affecting anything else and using my free will. That's not how things work. We know this. Science tells us that everything affects everything else. Like I said, it's cognitive dissonance. We're taught all these ideas that fight one another. And it prevents us from connecting the dots. Unless we find the source of the dysfunction between the ideas. Unless we escape the bad rationalizations that are given to us for bad ideas. And we can do that by cooperating online. You know, I would bet that over the course of this campaign, there are Trump supporters who have become Bernie supporters. And I would say that it's not very likely that any Bernie supporters have suddenly become Trump supporters. Because we're doing fact-checking. Because we're exposing the lies. Because we're working together to preserve the truth. And that's what the internet's all about. Working together to preserve the truth. As close as to a common truth as we can get. We have the ability to create a common truth. One that connects us all. One that we can all agree on. We now have that ability. If we're clever, if we cooperate, if we see the connections between all of us, then we can change things radically, as I've been saying since the very first podcast. Everything can work in a much more efficient, much more harmonious way. We'll never have a utopia. We'll never have a world without drama. And we'll never have a world that is completely absent of fear and hatred and ignorance. It won't happen. But we can minimize it. We can expand the informed to be the majority. And it's happening. It's not something that we're controlling. It's something we're participating in. Every time you go online, every time you share something on Twitter that you agree with or that feels true to you or feels good to you, you're participating in the process. And every time someone comes to you and says, you know that quote's fake, they're participating in the process. You're exchanging information. We're fact-checking. We're ruling things out. And through this process that is happening faster and faster every day, greater speed of information traveling, the greater amount of people every day sending information, greater size of files that can be sent every single day. It's all growing. It's all accelerating. I think I mentioned in another episode that you can really gauge the speed of change in a world by its communication system. Back when you had to send a messenger on horseback or a carrier pigeon or something like that, foreign policy, military decisions, economics, business, all of these things moved at a snail's pace compared to now. Why? Well, because to send one message took, a week? Maybe a couple days at least, a few weeks at most. If you have to put it on a ship going across the ocean, well, it could be several weeks. And if it has to go to the other side of the world, a month, maybe more. And that's being generous, I think, in my estimations. That means a simple movement of troops, change in position of ships, change in purchase orders for a particular supplier. All of these things took a lot of time. There was a lot of waiting in between. Now, we'll send out a message and it will be received, as far as our perception goes, instantly. That means the state of the world changes with the transfer of information. The faster we are transferring information, the faster the world is changing. Our world, our society, and what we're doing to it, and what we're doing to the planet, how we're processing it, how we're working with each other. All of it changes faster and faster and faster. And if you're not keeping up, then you're going to get left behind. If your institution is obsolete, it's not going to be able to function in the changed environment. If it's not adaptable, and that's the thing about institutions, they're not adaptable. They depend on the status quo. And up until recently, we've had a close enough facsimile of the status quo for them to have the time to adapt at least a little bit to stay relevant. When the internet was first being adopted, companies got web pages that were horrible. Over the years, they developed things where you could order online and so on and so forth. And in doing so, their physical brick and mortar stores started closing because people don't want to go to them anymore. It's an intrusion on their new life, having to go into a store and pick things out when they could do it from anywhere. So these stores are going to close. It's a question of when, for the most part, unless it's the sort of thing where you need stuff immediately. Drugstores, grocery stores, things like that, of course. Even then, there's home delivery services and otherwise. But I think people will always want to go and look at their food or look at, certain other things that they want to buy before they buy them. However, for most things, people are quite content ordering online. So, they've had to evolve. But they didn't anticipate crowdsourcing. They didn't anticipate people being able to open their own shops from their house, their own stores, from their house. They don't need any investment in a call center or anything like that. They can handle everything by email. They don't need to invest in lawyers or anything like that because they're being hosted by another site that has that stuff covered. So we can compete with the big guys now because it's just as easy to find the little guys as it is to find the big guys. That's what net neutrality is all about, making sure that continues. That's a fight that involves, by the way, the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. There are clauses within that about intellectual copyright laws and things of that nature that indicate strongly that it's going to absolutely decimate net neutrality. certain sites will have the ability to be faster and to have, people will have more access to them. They'll show up more search results, things like that. And then other sites will not. Other sites will be very, very slow, like your site, my site, things like that. And you only, at the end of the day, end up getting a channel package of some sort, just like with TV. Oh, well, you can pay for Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Google search. And, anything on top of that, you're going to pay a 50-cent surcharge or something like that. That sort of plan, that sort of policy, that sort of idea is absolutely antithetical to what the internet does and what it can continue to do. And that's what they want to do. They really, really, really want to limit our ability to connect the way that we are. They want to be able to control it somehow, in any way. They want to be able to restrict our ability to figure out that the system doesn't work for us. And when I talk about the 0.001% or the 62 human beings who own more than everyone else on the planet, I'm not imagining a literal conspiracy. Although I'm sure they do happen, but I think they're more on individual bases, like contracts, like between government and business. I think that ultimately the real conspiracy is just an understanding by those people in those positions that what they're doing, what their goal is, what their mission is to stay in power, stay wealthy, and get more power and get wealthier. And that's their job. And I think that's the real conspiracy. It's not necessarily these people getting together and plotting against the rest of mankind, but rather it's just a continued expansion of look out for yourself. Look out for yourself and damn everyone else. And I think that's ultimately what's happening. And it's because we've set up a system, political system, a corporate system, a finance system, a religious system, where the people who get to the top, generally speaking, are the ones who are ruthless and ruthlessly ambitious. There's a saying about how those who want power are the last ones who should have it. That's generally true, but it's the ones who want power that can jump through all the hoops in the political system, that then can get financing to be a career politician. It's largely rich people who are able to get even richer. Not a lot of poor people breaking into politics. It does happen. Lots of people. There are people who grew up poor who are in politics, but they don't get to the top usually because they're not willing to play the same dirty tricks that the ones at the top play. Now, for the first time ever, I think we're starting to see that, and we're starting to do something about it. Before, the idea was generally, you can't change it, it's always been that way. There's no point in complaining. Just go and you vote for the lesser of two evils, and you cross your fingers and hope for the best. That's not acceptable anymore. It's not. It's not something that we should accept. It's not something that anyone should accept. The lesser of two evils. Not that these people are fundamentally evil. They're products of their environment. They're products of their conditioning. They're products of the systems that we've created. And therefore they are dysfunctional individuals. Because dysfunctional systems produce dysfunctional individuals. We are strong together. When we listen to things that try to divide us, we weaken ourselves. It's not cliche, it's the truth. And the truth is also, believe it or not, that those people that we vilify, the rich, the powerful, the ones who keep these systems running, the truth about them is that they don't have any control any more than you or I do. The products of their systems. Doesn't make them good or bad. What they do is dysfunctional, and we can look at that and we can try to correct it. But when we judge those people, when we call them evil, when we call them, just horrible, horrible names, and we make no effort to understand where it comes from, then we're just as bad as when we judge poor people and the things that they do. We're still not understanding that it's a product of the dysfunction within the system. And we're still not working to our own advantage when we do that. We're not helping. Because the only thing that's going to help is looking at things as they are. Not in the context of how we think they should be, what's good or bad, what's good or evil, but looking at them right now and finding out where the problems are. And blaming each other is not going to solve anything, because it's not a question of individuals, no matter how wealthy or powerful those individuals are. It's all natural systems. We are nature looking at itself. We've been given imaginations. We've been given forebrains with a cognitive ability to picture things differently from how they are. What that can do, if used with reason, critical thinking, deductive reasoning, logic, all of these synonyms for basically just thinking things out and working them out. If we use that imagination with those skills that we also have, then we can get to the bottom of any problem. We are brilliant. We are also incredibly stupid. That is because we are young. We are a young species. Dinosaurs roamed the earth for, hundreds of millions of years? We've been humans for a few 100,000 years. We're still learning. The dinosaurs didn't have technology, so they didn't have any sort of accelerated evolution or accelerated society that we know of anyways. It could have all turned to dust by now, but generally speaking, that's the idea we have. So we're young, but we're smart. Now, I don't know how many smart children you've met, but they're generally a danger to themselves and everyone around them because they're smart enough to figure things out, but not mature enough to understand the consequences. And that's us. That's the human race right now. But we're learning. We've made horrific mistakes. But we're learning. And we continue to learn. We can continue to learn so long as we talk, as we keep up communication, as we help each other, as we collaborate, communicate, and debate, discuss, live and love and laugh and make music. We can learn. We can be better. We're smart children playing with guns. It means people are going to get hurt. But the collective anguish, collective grief, the collective despair weighs on all of us. From every death, every abuse, every broken heart, every disappointment, every child starving. Whether you want to admit it or not, you're affected by it. Deeply. At your core. It's where all this unexplained, quote-unquote, depression and anxiety come from. Because we're all products of the whole. Whatever's happening in the whole is going to be reflected in the now and in you because you're part of it. If you're in a dysfunctional world, you're going to experience dysfunction. Things don't make sense. And pain is the teacher that society is supposed to learn from, just like individuals are supposed to learn from it. Pain is something that we're supposed to react to and stop doing whatever's causing it. As children, we learn that when first time you stick something metal in an electrical outlet, first time you touch the stove, the first time you annoy the cats, and you get scratched. We learn. Humans are slower to learn. And part of the reason for us being slower to learn is that we fight amongst ourselves instead of working together. Not always. The only reason why human society's gotten to the point that it's at right now is that we have worked together. We developed a way to talk that sets us apart from virtually every other species on the planet, save maybe whales and dolphins, and we're still not sure about that. But we can communicate. Complex ideas, abstract ideas. Ideas that most other species can't even comprehend. We have this huge creative potential. All of us. I've seen it at work. I've seen groups of people get together and do things out of love and make something wonderful. There's a show on TV called Hope for Wildlife. I don't have TV, but I believe it's on the Oasis network. You can probably also find it online. I knew that woman in the town I grew up in. She's still there. What she did was she started out with a trailer home, and it was her home. And she bought a shed and another trailer and fought with the government out of love to care for wildlife that had been injured by human negligence or cruelty, and to rehabilitate it and release it back into the wild. And she struggled for a very, very, very long time, but she kept putting that love and that energy into her work. And other people gravitated towards her because they could sense it and because they felt the same way. And they thought, this is someone who's got something going. And now, she has a massive facility, subsidized by the government, with staff, veterinarians, and a reality show behind her, taking her around the continent and overseas to do what she does and to spread that love. That's the power of it. That's the power of connection. That's the power of love and passion in taking whatever anger you feel about the dysfunction of the world and channeling it into love. You can do it. Anyone can. Channel it into love for yourself and love for everything else, because everything else is you. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, feel free to tweet at me or direct message me or comment on the videos or comment on my YouTube videos if you're watching the podcast on there. If any of this is confusing, I can provide a ton of source material, ton of great thinkers who've influenced my thinking dramatically. Because ideas aren't our own, no matter whose they are. They're a product of all the information you've received over the course of your life in conjunction with the information you're receiving right now and the environment that you're in. We can't really take credit for our ideas. We can stand by our ideas. We can advocate for the ideas, but ideas are something that are given to you by your environment, by the universe, by creation itself. They're not ours. They're everyone's. everything's. So you have to give credit where it's due, in the sense that you have to acknowledge that you are existing and deciding and living based on what everyone else has ever done and will ever do. That's where the credit goes. It goes to everyone and everything. But that having been said, some other people who've seen this, some other people who've shared their perceptions, that I highly, highly recommend, and will provide links to PDFs if you're interested. Free ebooks if you've got a reader. So, the author that I resonate with the most is Alan Watts. If any of you are interested in reading any of his material, I'd recommend you start with a book called The Book on the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are. It's a fascinating read. It's very, very short. The basis behind the book is, and it was written back in the 70s, it's just as relevant today. None of the information or the perspective that he gives is incoherent with today, and that's something that tells you that there is truth in it. It's not just based on the superficial. It's based on the undercurrents through life. Highly recommend it. So the idea behind the book was that in previous times, previous generations, there were many taboos. In Japanese culture, one of the taboos was, of course, talking about sex. So parents would have a pillow book, I believe it was called. A book to give to the child that would explain sex and biology and the stuff that the culture didn't allow the discussion of. So Alan Watts thought, well, most children now know about as much about sex as adults do. It's not really a taboo anymore, even if some people are uncomfortable with it. Religion's not so much of a taboo either. We all discuss it to a certain degree. We tend to shy away from arguing about it, but we discuss it. So then, what is the taboo? Well, it's in recognizing who we are. That's why it is the book on the taboo against knowing who you are. There is a general thought that it is narcissistic or arrogant to say the words, I am God. But it's only arrogant or narcissistic to say, I am God, if you think you're the only one who is. However, if you were saying, we are God, we are the universe, experiencing life through a human perspective, it's not narcissistic. It doesn't put you at the center. It puts you as part of the whole, as interconnected with everything else. So that's why Alan Watts resonates with me. Another fascinating read, Biocentrism by Robert Lanza. There was another author with him, I can't remember off the top of my head, but biocentrism is more or less talking about the interconnectedness of all things on all levels and the nature of human consciousness and how human consciousness affects reality and vice versa. Terence McKenna, no relation, well worth reading. And I highly recommend his book that he wrote with his brother. His brother's still alive. He's an ethnopharmacologist working with the university, I can't remember where. And his research is actually quite fascinating. His brother, Dennis, he talks a great deal. I'm actually going to draw a great deal on him and Terence for my episode on hallucinogenics. But he's done great work with treating anxiety, depression, PTSD, etc. with hallucinogenics, with psilocybin mushrooms, dimethyltryptamine, LSD, things of that nature. Because they give us a unique perspective on ourselves, you see. That's their value. That's what they do really, really well. They make us look at ourselves in a hard way that we wouldn't really have the ability to... We don't have the ability to separate ourselves from ourselves the way that psychedelics do. So Terence McKenna and Dennis McKenna, back, I think it was the late 70s, wrote The Invisible Landscape. Mind, hallucinogens, and the I Ching. It all seems like a very interesting combination, doesn't it? Highly recommend it. Some of it's very, very, very hard science. Some of it's mathematics. Some of it's trying to make sense of metaphysics with mathematics. But it's brilliant, it's wonderful, and it's absolutely worth the read. The two of them are outside-the-box thinkers. Absolutely recommend. I'm not going to just keep listing off people's names for the rest of the episode, but I'd like to touch on a few things that I would just recommend you Google search and experience it yourself. Bo Burnham is a recent stand-up comedian, and he is hilarious and awesome. My only problem, he doesn't produce enough content, but I think that he's kind of doing that deliberately so he doesn't wear out his bits. So that's fine. I think he does a lot of just like open mics and stuff like that. And but look up Bo Burnham. He did a stand-up show called What, and I recommend starting with that. It's an hour-long special. He released it for free, and he's just a great thinker. And he makes some really great points about some dysfunctions within our society. Bill Hicks, if you haven't heard of Bill Hicks, he's passed away as well now, but he was brilliant, and look up any of his shows. You'll see he was just very much on top of the world, and just he got it. He really did. He was one of the great thinkers of that time. He had his struggles, of course, like we all do, and I think that gives you even greater insight in a lot of ways. But we have to talk about these people. We have to talk about the ideas they advocated for, look at them, and figure out, were they totally right? Were they only 50% right? Were they 75% right? If they were wrong, where were they wrong? And if they weren't wrong, then why did we never listen to them? Why didn't we adopt this? Why didn't we start actually practicing these ideas in our day-to-day life? Because it's hard, because the habits are ingrained. Well, because our society reinforces one particular way of being. And what these guys are saying is something completely different. But we have that opportunity now. Like I say, it's all about connection. At the end of the day, it's all about the fact that everything's connected. And about our internal desire for connection that's based on that knowledge. Our bodies know that we're connected to everyone else. Our bodies know that we're connected to nature. Our bodies know that you are me and I am you. And I include our brain when I say our bodies, incidentally. It's us, our physical form, the way it reacts to the environment, integrates itself into the world. The brain knows that we're all connected. And it works on that under the surface without you even being consciously aware. It's what loneliness is. It's what a sense of isolation is. And fear comes from a sense of isolation, from insecurity. Whether it's real or imagined. I think I'm going to stop this particular ramble now because we've talked about a fair amount of different subjects, and to be honest, I'm getting tired and I need to take a drink of water and rest my voice for a little while. I'll do some more unscripted, unplanned podcast episodes in the future, especially now that I have a ton more storage space on Spreaker. And I'm going to try to start doing some live broadcasting as well. I have not set up any guests or any particular scheduled times, and it will probably be a spontaneous thing that I will re-release as a recorded episode after the fact, unless some of you just happen to be on Twitter and tune in when it happens. There's a bunch of people that I'd love to talk to on the podcast. If anyone listening knows Doug Stanhope, Joe Rogan, anyone interesting? Anyone who's got some radical ideas, anyone who's open to radical ideas, love to have you on, love to have your friend on, whoever. My schedule's hard to work these things into because apparently for doing call-ins and to have multiple hosts on a show, you have to be doing it from a desktop, and I'm generally just recording from my phone on my commute. I'm sure not going to be running a laptop in traffic, but I'll try to work it in somewhere, and the episode may include a yelling, crazy toddler known as my son, but we'll see. In any case, if you listen this far, I hope I've gotten the gears spinning, thinking about radical thoughts, thinking about the next conversation you're going to have, the next article you're going to look up, the next thing you're going to share on Twitter or Facebook. Don't do boring chit-chat, Occasionally it's fine. If you like sports, that's great. Yeah, I go, hey, they won the game last night. I'm so happy. Great. Don't ramble on about trivia for 20 minutes when you could be telling them that basic income's a thing and we're going to be trying it in Ontario in the near future. We've already tried it. It worked. We just stopped. Tried it in Dauphin, Manitoba. Talk about electoral reform and about how Ottawa is still putting together a parliamentary committee on it, and that proportional representation will give us a more diverse voice in our electoral system and things will actually change. Because so many times you bring up politics and they'll just go, it'll never change. A lot of these are the older people too, but some younger people. But because they've never seen it change, they don't believe it can. But they never saw the internet coming. I remember telling my parents when I was 10 that I wanted one of those cool Sony handheld TVs they sold at the Sony store. If you remember that. I think they were black and white. I said, what do you need that for? What do you need a TV in your pocket for? TV at home, you can watch that. So it's a different world. We accept things that we never thought we'd accept. So talk to people. Have a conversation. You don't have to get into an argument. You don't have to force it on them. You just have to get them curious, get them interested, get them fascinated. You want to talk about marijuana with people and advocate for it. Talk about how fascinating it is on how it works in the brain. How it's non-toxic. You'd have to ingest 1,500 pounds to overdose. If you want to talk about Bernie Sanders, talk about what he stands for and what it means and why it's different, why now is different, what's changing. We got to stop coming at each other going, you're wrong. Or, you're a jackass for saying that. You got to start looking at the content of what people are saying instead of looking at how they're saying it or any of that nonsense. Look at what they're saying they believe. And then ask them, is that really what you believe? But what about this? If they get frustrated and they walk away, so be it. As long as you're being kind and compassionate and open, conversational, just as long as you're doing that, as long as you're not being aggressive, if they get aggressive, walk away. Easy. Say, okay, I'm sorry, bye. Saying sorry is not hard. Just say sorry and bye. If you're wrong. But we got to get the ideas out there, and I think that the ideas stand on their own. They're good ideas. They're good ideas, and what we're currently working with are bad ideas, and we can point out why they're bad ideas, why they don't work, why we continuously have the problems and the dysfunction that we have. We can see the source of it. Problem is, a lot of activists, a lot of people who are trying to work on the system and trying to work on this stuff are focusing on these small individual issues. And I know everyone believes their issue is huge. And it is. It's big to you. It matters. My point is that the source of it's probably all the same. And it's another example of divide and conquer. When you get these people over here who are advocating for cancer research, and you get these people over here who are advocating for women's rights, and these people over here who are advocating for civil rights, and these people over here who are advocating for LGBT, and these people over here who are advocating for nationalism or something like that. They're all trying to solve problems. The problems are built into the larger system, not individuals. It's not legislation within the system. The system itself has to change. We have to look at things and imagine them to be very, very infinitely flexible. I think that I really am going to leave it there for now. Keep thinking. Keep talking. Keep sharing radical ideas, because it will turn things around for us. Humanity can do so much better, and we will. You and me and us. That's it for today. Have a great day. Radically yours, I'm Ryan McKenna.